I used to love to lecture at colleges. I've probably done more of that than any man alive. I've been to every school in America, probably twice at least. Anyhow, I would talk to the guys and I would speak for a few minutes, then I'd open it up to questions and answers. That's what I love, because then you're really talking to people. I would get more questions about the Silver Surfer, especially from the brightest people in the audience. Somehow they'd be interested in the philosophy and the message and why he spoke that way and how I felt about him and blah, blah, blah. Wherever I went, and man, I got a kick out of that.
The Surfer's popularity really came from the fact that he was the outsider, trapped on Earth, and he allowed us to hold up a mirror to a lot of what was going on at the time, to take a look at the things that were wrong with society, that were wrong in the world. And I think that's a classic science fiction trope. You can always address what's going on outside your window a lot more easily with, a guy who rides a silver surfboard than you can with flesh and blood people.
The Surfer has never been hugely, he's been more of a cult character. Within that universe, certain people respond. And so he was a fascinating character to begin with, because in the beginning he was he was completely cold and learning about humanity, and then he makes this phenomenal sacrifice. He sacrifices everything, all this power, the entire universe, to help these people. So he becomes a fallen angel, he becomes Jesus. Any metaphor you want to throw toward it, it'll work,
The great thing that Marvel did was find a way to talk to people who were older about comics, to give them more adult relationships and so on and so forth. They really caught the college audience. That was their first thing. They were able to do stuff that the Superman and Batman and the more traditional heroes had not done. They had really never grown out of this ghetto of childhood that they were stuck in. And Marvel opened up a whole new universe.
The Surfer was an interesting character in the fact that he had have almost limitless potential, but the character is only as good as what is being done with it by the writer and the artist team that has it. I was a kid when the Silver Surfer first appeared. He was an incredible character, a noble creature himself. He was working for, a very hungry giant who was going to do in Earth. It was an incredible story.
We were doing a Fantastic Four story, and I wanted Galactus to be the villain. I was very proud of the Galactus that I had dreamed up, I said to Jack, make him the biggest guy you can draw. He's a demigod. Make him look like a demigod. He's a guy who destroys planets. And he doesn't do it because he's cruel, it's because he's hungry. He eats their energy. So he goes through the galaxy, or maybe through the universe, finding planets that have enough energy to sustain him. I thought I was a genius with this idea. So I got the artwork, and there was some nut on a flying surfboard running around. I hadn't told Jack anything about that. I said, who's that? He said, well, I figure anybody who's as big and powerful as you say Galactus should be, he shouldn't have to go and search for planets to eat by himself. He would have somebody, a herald, who goes ahead and does it. And that was all. To Jack, he was a herald. He was going to find planets, and he only had them in a few panels.
The first time I can remember seeing the original Surfer material, the stuff that Jack and Stan did in FF 48 through 50, and they were all my brother's comics. And I was 4 or 5 maybe, and we sort of would paw through that box every once in a while when my brother wasn't looking. And I can remember those issues in particular always kind of weirded me out, because the Kirby artwork was always, kind of grotesque to my 5-year-old eyes. But it was a grotesque that you couldn't look away from. So I kept going back to those issues, even though, they probably gave me nightmares the night thereafter.
I always found Galactus's and the Silver Surfer's relationship really kind of strange. Here was this rather honorable and downright noble creature floating around in space on this surfboard and looking terrific, but what he was basically doing was bringing the devil and destruction to wherever he went. He was an immediate hit. Everybody just loved his character.
I said, this is so unique and so original, and I liked the way Jack drew him because he looked so heroic and so noble, more than heroic. There was a nobility to him. And then I decided I want to use him in a lot of stories. And what I want to do is have him really be my voice. I want him to say all the things that maybe I've been thinking of for years, like, we live in the greatest planet in the world. There's enough food for everybody. We have sunshine. We have enough water, beautiful fields. Everybody should be happy living on Earth. It's paradise. And yet, are we crazy? We fight each other. We hate each other. We tear the place up. But what is the matter with us? Are we an insane race? So I wanted the Silver Surfer to mouth all those kind of thoughts, as if somebody coming from a rational world were to see all the nutty, irrational things that human beings do.
Well, at the time that the Surfer was created, things like Gilgamesh were very popular, the epic poem. People were setting off into countercultural tracks. The Surfer fit right into that. The Surfer was a saint who could come in and do commentary on the insanity of our own society. And Stan was pretty good at doing some, very basic level philosophical storylines along those ways.
I think the 60s was obviously a time of great upheaval culturally and in the society. And because the Surfer was an outsider, because he hadn't, bought into the system to some extent, he could see the inequities of racism, of class wars. And I think Stan really held him up as an example of what we could be without all of the baggage that we had at the time. I think he was embraced by the counterculture to a certain extent because he didn't have any of the baggage. He wasn't he wasn't a tool of the man.
This was 1965 when he first appeared, and so we were just going into the whole Beatles, Vietnam thing, and a sort of alien being who didn't belong on this planet was a popular concept, caught a lot of people's attention. There were a number of blacklight posters that were produced at that time featuring the Marvel characters, but the Surfer is probably the most iconic. And again, because he was a silver guy in the blackness of space, he looked great under blacklight, And I would venture to say there wasn't a college dorm in the country that didn't have a Silver Surfer poster in there somewhere. He was an icon. As I say, the comic itself never really kind of sustained that at the time. But he was there. Joe Satriani, who was a Bay Area guitar rock and roll guy, one of the covers of his albums had a Silver Surfer piece of art on it. I mean, it was a pop culture phenomenon.
This is the guy who had Stan's soapbox on the bullpen page. So here it was, and the first issues were double-sized 44-page stories. So it was a 44-page Stan soapbox, essentially. He got to talk about whatever was on his mind and do it in this wonderfully melodramatic but truly heartfelt. Stan at his best was always so from the heart, and that's why I love that character and why I love those books so much.